After hours of waiting, I was beginning to feel a little better. Mark thought maybe exiting through the window would solve our problem, but we would have to break it to make that happen, which would automatically attract attention that we don't fucking need. Aside of all that, we would have to jump. Again, I'm practically paralyzed from the waist down. I have no hope. Mark unlocks the door with the pistol to his side. Ted lifts me up by my shoulders, and we make our way out of the room, and we're in the hallway now. And there wasn't a silhouette in sight. They both helped me down the staircase. As I kept looking behind our direction, even if the place was empty, I still felt a presence, watching us. The moonlight was the only thing keeping our view clear. We make our way out of the front door, and we rush towards the car. Ted goes, "Well, shit." Mark gives him a deadpan stare as Ted groans about his missing flashlight. "Oh, who gives a shit about the fucking flashlight? Get in the fucking car!" Mark snaps, but lucky enough, I was able to take the front seat with Mark while Ted sits in the back. It wasn't until I see the front door of the condo rapidly swing open, and all we can see is a void of pitch black behind that door. Then all of a sudden, the car begins to shake. We all look up at the roof terrified. Something has made its way on top of the car. Then silence. But Mark skids it out of there and begins firing off shots. As the car begins swerving into different lanes, I could barely hear it in my left ear. Then out of nowhere, he stomps on the brakes as we all fly forward. My head hits the front so fucking hard. To my surprise, the airbag puts me into a state. There, on the left of us, was a boat launch. And right at the entrance of the fence was a decomposed corpse on a wheelchair. Mark gets out of the car with caution as Ted remains confused. "Let's move," he says as he desperately drags me towards the entrance due to the exhaustion. He then leans the wheelchair forward to dump the body carelessly on the ground, and then props me on the chair. "You got this," he says out of breath. We enter the boat launch slowly as I stroll behind them. They're what looks like to be a tiny office only a few seconds away. Mark rushes towards the door to find it locked, but he manages to kick it open. Mark flashes his light to see another decomposed corpse in a corner, with a set of keys on the ground. Mark grabs the keys. This could be our saving grace, but it's gonna take some searching if so. We want to get as far away from here as possible. Not even 40 minutes in, and Mark finds us a boat, so we can get the fuck out of Dodge. We get on the boat despite my struggle, as Mark tries every single key possible, making me lose hope as we should have thought twice before getting on. Mark tries the last key, and to our surprise, the boat begins working. With our luck, anything shitty is bound to happen, but lucky enough, we have a full tank of gas. I was relieved as we cruise out of there slowly. "Thank fucking God," Ted says as he sits there, lethargic after the extreme amount of adrenaline getting the best of him. As the boat launch fades from our view, I swear I could see the silhouette of a person standing there. Somebody was following us. The boat was about 2 stories, making me nervous because Mark didn't check the bottom floor. "Hey Ted, what do you think's down there?" I said while shivering with anxiety. "Only one way to find out." He opens the entrance to a staircase leading down into pitch black. He makes his way down without any hesitation to turn on a light and finds a disemboweled corpse. The room was small, but there was a radio. Ted plugs his nose as he was on the verge to vomiting and makes his way to the radio. It appears that the radio is already on. "Hey, is there anyone out there? We need help!" White noise and static from the radio as Mark shakes his legs impatiently, but nothing. Ted sighs as he storms up the stairs and vomits a pile. "Trust me, you don't want to go down there," he says as he wipes his mouth with his sleeve. Eventually the sun begins to rise, and the wind begins to pick up. Particles of dust hit our eyes as we begin to panic. Then, there it was. From the distance came the Sandstorm. No, this can't be. Not again! Ted panics. I mean, he is losing his fucking shit, as we all are. We're only 30 minutes away from the other side. We can do this. Mark shouts as we rush inside and close the door. It happened so fucking quickly, but our view was completely cut off. All we can see is the brown haze of sand rushing past us. Here we are. Hopeless. As we push ourselves to face the madness, I can feel the boat shaking, even tilting, as I stare out of the windows to make out any shape or forms in the distance. But nothing. It was too dark to see anything. Mark grabs one of those giant flashlights to shine ahead of us, and into the void we were facing against right then and there, we could see a giant cruise ship ahead of us. "Oh, great," Mark says, as we catch up to it, but to our realization, the ship was moving slowly. Right on the side of the ship was a ladder, which was convenient enough. Ted begins to argue with Mark. "There's no way we're getting on that ship. We have a perfectly good boat right here." Ted turns to me in shock as I stand there perfectly on my 2 feet. I try to walk towards them, but my left leg gave out, causing me to collapse on the floor, face first. "We're getting on that fucking ship." I growled aggressively. "What about your wheelchair, man?" Ted says. "Nobody cares about the fucking wheelchair, Ted!" They both help me up as I grip one of the tables for balance. Mark exits the boat, and then he begins climbing the ladder. Ted quickly ties a long rope on my waist, and then onto his. Ted gets on the ladder as I follow him behind, but my legs kept giving out, causing me to fall backwards, but lucky enough the rope caught me off guard as I hold onto the ladder for my dear life. How Ted was managing this situation was quite impressive. He uses all of his strength to lift me upwards, and within seconds we made it onto the top. I look back to see the boat vanish into the storm. I use all of my courage to force myself forward, but Ted was right there to help. The doors were locked, but Mark just straight up punches the glass, unlocks the door, and then we enter a long hallway. Nobody was around, but the winds howl. We make our way down the hallway. Mark tries to get into one of those rooms by kicking the doors in, to find them empty. We enter what appears to be a dining room area. I mean, this ship was fucking massive. After what felt like minutes of walking, Mark opens another door to find ourselves at the front of the ship, only to find what looked like the captain on a chair, with pale skin. We only assumed he was dead, or looked like it, anyway. Mark lightly taps his shoulder, and the captain's eyes open wide. He looked lethargic and malnourished. He says something that we couldn't really understand, as his voice was a dying wheeze. Out there," he says while pointing out the window. Then all of a sudden, the windows before us shatter completely, shards of glass flying into our face, then with quickness what looked like long, lengthy hands, grabbing the captain, violently pulling him back, his t-shirt tearing as the hands pull him through the window. Then he was gone. But the sand was blowing our direction, and into the boat before Mark pulls Ted and I out of the room, and slams the door shut. Then, this blood-curdling roar from the distance bludgeons our eardrums. Imagine the sound of a howling hurricane, a propeller, and a multitude of lions roaring. I cannot describe the amount of fear rushing through my veins, but I could only see the sand blowing on our feet from underneath the door. My legs began to give out again, but I fought against it. As we rush ourselves down the hall, back to the lounge area, Ted goes, "Fuck this!" before rushing out one of the doors. Mark follows him out the door, only to see Ted standing outside and leaning over the rails, as if he was attempting to jump off. Mark yells for him to come back inside before another blood-curdling roar shreds my eardrums. Then Ted literally flies upwards, as if gravity gave out, like something just sucked Ted into the sky as the void devours him. I could hear his screams as Mark slams the door shut and begins sobbing. I sat next to him and began doing the same. This is it. This is the end. And to whatever is out there is going to do the same thing to us. My intrusive thoughts told me just to walk out the door and expect the worst. Then out of nowhere, the winds just stop. Like everything becomes silent. Mark looks at me with blood-red glossy eyes. He then rushes to the door, and then everything was clear. The sunlight shines into his eyes as he uses his hand to cover his face from the overstimulating amount of light. Then, a big crash. Mark falls to the ground as I roll on the floor in terror. Mark gets up to look out the doorway to see that we've made it to the other side. What looked like an island. "We fucking made it!" Mark shouts, then running in my direction, and he lifts me upwards, and we both struggle to make our way out. We climb down the ladder and walk our way off the shoreline before we both collapse from utter exhaustion. Then, everything becomes dark. I wake up in a hospital. Again. "He's awake," the doctor says before getting a call to help another patient. I look to the left to see Mark next to me in a chair, passed out. I was relieved to see people again. It led me to think maybe this was all one fucked up nightmare. "You think Ted's alive?" Mark says, waking up from his deep sleep. I look to him and say, "No. No way." He looks to the side, avoiding eye contact. "I'm so sorry about your friend. My name is Joshua. I realized I never told you that. Thank you for saving my life." I said in a groggy voice before I could say anything else. Rumbling became a loud bass. Maybe somebody had their radio cranked up, only to my speculation. Mark opens the curtains, and miles away from our view is a dark void of sand.